Well, fellas, yesterday's video we were talking about my top 5 most annoying ships to play against. And when I was getting that list of ships together, I was going through my port and just kind of perusing through the carousel and thinking about, each ship and how annoying it was to play against and all that jazz. When I came across one that I absolutely hated, despised, and just had no limit to the amount of frustration that this one ship caused me. But I did wind up leaving it off the list because it's not exactly in that same state today as it was back in the day, and that is the Tier 10 British tech line battleship, the Conqueror. A ship I haven't really talked about in its own standalone video for, I think, almost a year or two at this point now. But the Conqueror, yeah, this ship at one point, well, right after it was released, was quite literally the single best battleship in the game, bar none. It was that cracked back when she was originally released, 6 years ago? Now, time has, changed a lot for her and for the game, so she's not quite to that levels anymore, of course, but she still is probably one of the best battleships for today's current meta, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, taking a look back at the Conqueror, looking at her features, and what does make her so well suited for today's World of Warships. A couple things real quick here at the start. I'm sorry I couldn't get a more interesting game for the background footage. The game you are going to be viewing does show off pretty much most of the Conqueror's strengths fairly well. It's why it's the one that's being chosen. I had a couple more higher damage games, but they were just kind of boring. I had like 9 blowout matches back to back to back to back trying to get some decent footage for the Conqueror, so I do apologize for that, but that's just the nature of the game at the moment. Second thing, if you do like this video, find informational and entertaining, please make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, and all that jazz helps out on the YouTube side of things. So, the Conqueror, the Techline Tier 10 British battleship. What does this ship have going for her? Well, first off, what is this ship? The ship is essentially a stretched out Lion class, right? With another turret slapped on there. So you get 4 turrets with 3 guns apiece, giving you a grand total of 12 419mm guns, with the British BB, HE, and AP, which they do get their own unique shells for each. We'll start with the HE because that is what most players do walk away from a Conqueror encounter remembering. But real quick too, before we get into that, if you are playing a Conqueror or any British battleship, you're not swapping back and forth between your HE and your AP, you are playing it quite wrong. You should see an example of that here in a minute in the background footage, but we'll get to that when we get to the AP. But anyway, the HE, it is quite good. Some of the best HE in the game. So on top of having just a great alpha rating of 7,200 damage per shell, the British BB-HE also has a very high fire chance. With a Conqueror, it's 48% per shell. And when you're throwing 12 shells at the target, yeah, that's going to start some fires, if not multiple fires per salvo. If you notice too, the dispersion for the Conqueror isn't fantastic, which is why I typically will start out with HE at longer ranges, and then as we get into closer range engagements, then I'll go ahead and swap on over to the AP, because from like 15 kilometers in, the AP will generally go where you want the shells to go, but from 15-ish kilometers out, yeah, I just kind of stick to HE unless I got a big beautiful broadside and it doesn't look like that captain's paying attention at all, is going to keep selling in a straight line. Then yeah, I'll load the AP and let them have it. But again, generally speaking, 15 kilometers out I use the HE, 15 kilometers in I'll primarily use AP, and then I'll swap back and forth between them as I see fit. So obviously if someone's like bow tanking or they're angled out significantly, I will just stick to the HE at close range. But then again, like I said, if I got broadside, I'm going to swap to the AP. But speaking of the AP, what does the AP have going for it? Well, it is pretty good, 13,000 damage for its alpha, and it is a short fuse AP shell. What does that mean? Well, most other battleships in the game, their fuse time will be 0.333 seconds. The Conqueror's AP shell is 0.015 seconds, which means that the shell, once it impacts armor, it will explode in, well, roughly half-ish the time as standard AP. What that does is when you're dealing with lightly armored targets like cruisers, light cruisers, or battleship extremities, you'll get pins instead of overpins. So when you do find those cruisers and you do catch them at an angle that you can bite into, you want to use that AP and absolutely just devastate cruisers. So it's quite good when you do, again, swap back and forth between AP and HE. Both shells have their strengths, and you shouldn't primarily be using one over the other. Again, I know the HE is great, and coming from a Battleship player's perspective of being stuck getting burned down by this thing for all eternity, you may want to just stick with that. And yeah, you can get some really darn good results by just spamming HE, but you get the best results by swapping back and forth between AP and HE. So Sealer, its guns are great. What else does it have going for it? Well, besides that, you do also get a kind of weakish hull, and this was always the argument for the Conqueror back in the day. It's like, oh yeah, its guns are so good and such, but the hull is quite squishy. Well, the hull is squishy, but you do get a super heal, the infamous Conqueror super heal. If you get down to like the last third of your HP, you can slap T and you'll be back up to probably around 75-80% damage, 80% HP, depending upon, did you get Citadel'd too many times, right? But yes, you can reprint your ship back with the single press of a button, and it is a sight to behold, the ship just literally coming back to life after it gets bullied and beat down for several minutes, which is why it's a pretty popular pick in competitive, because it is just a punching bag that if you get someone in there that knows what they're doing, they know when to disengage and they know when they can take more hits, and unless you all just dogpile a Conqueror at once, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. And that makes up for the fact that the ship's covered in 32mm of armor and her citadel is exposed, and she's got that flat transom stern that you can shove AP shells up, because that's just a 90-degree flat angle that you're hitting with your AP shells, so you can citadel her through the stern, which is pretty funny. But back in the day, what really made this ship busted is that citadel used to be submerged, and she's still got the great HE, great AP, and the super heal all at once with a submerged citadel. And her concealment used to be a hell of a lot better. Now you might be thinking, well, Sealord, she has like 12.3 kilometer concealment. That's already like fantastic. And yes, you're not wrong. That is fantastic. But when this ship came out, she had a minimum detection range, if you built into it, of 11.3 kilometers, which is just dumb for a 12-gun battleship to have. So you had a 11.3 kilometer concealment, a super heal, HE, the likes of which we'd never seen in this game before at this point. Keep in mind, when the Conqueror came out, I don't know if many of you remember back in the day, but we used to make fun of battleships that had to swap to HE to deal with other battleships. You see the messages pop up in chat. Oh, you had to switch to HE to beat me in combat, sir. You clearly are the inferior player, right? And now everyone's spamming HE because it's like the Conqueror unlocks the ability for battleship players to realize that they do have a one button. So yeah, that happened. But yeah, imagine this, you're dealing with a ship that can burn you down from seemingly across the map, and you can't even citadel it in return. The main thing battleships can do, right? Like the battleships love to get citadel hits because their shells have this, incredibly high alpha damage. And despite the ship being fairly poorly armored, the citadel was below the water, so you couldn't even get to it except at like super mega extreme ranges through the deck, right, with plunging fire. So you get burned down by the ship, you try to citadel it back, and all you get are pins. And when you do finally beat it down to where it's down to like, this last 10% of its HP, they go dark, and the next time you see them again, they're at friggin' full health because of that super heal. So yeah, and all that time, they're melting you down. There's something I forgot to mention with the HE shell too. I don't know if there's some type of hidden like ripping figure somewhere in the coding, whatever. But the British BBHE, especially the Conquerors, you can just clear an entire ship's AA in like 3-ish salvos. That hasn't changed. Probably because it's 12 shells being thrown at one target, so it just coats the entire flight deck with these HE explosions, and it just rips your AA apart. Two of the best friends you can have in a match is a CV and a Conqueror in a division together, because that Conqueror will target whatever ship the CV wants to pick on, rip its AA mounts off, and then the CV will just have its way with it. It's also pretty funny is that back in the day, we had the Thunder in game before we had the Thunder in game, with the Conqueror's ability to mount the Thunderous guns. That's right, you could fit the 457mm 18-inch guns of the Thunderer onto the Conqueror. Now, they weren't as accurate, but you still had them, which means now you have this goofy, ridiculously stealthy ship with these 18-inch guns. Yeah, it was pretty dumb. What I used to do is use the 11.3 kilometer concealment of the Super Hill to simply walk up to enemy battleships and blast them in their citadel at literally like 5 kilometers with my Conqueror's AP with the 18-inch guns. It's kind of dumb. There's still some clips of it on the channel somewhere of me doing that. And it was fun. It was goofy. You couldn't get citadel again because your citadel is below the waterline. So, yeah. Ship was dumb back in the day. But of course, she's been hit with many a nerf. Her detection range is now 12.3 kilometers, which while nerfed is still very good. Her citadel is above the waterline. And what's really funny with her heal, with her heal, they nerfed the cooldown time of it. And then, like, I think a year ago, they buffed it again to where she has the normal cooldown time on the heal and not the extended, like, a 2-minute cooldown time on her super heal. But they did raise her citadel. So, like, you can still get citadel, but your super heal comes off a cooldown relatively fast. All is well there. And with those simple adjustments to the Conqueror and the continuing evolution of the game, she's very much a good ship today. I would not call her broken anymore. She's very much just a solid battleship and one that's very well suited for the meta. I mean, if you think about it too, we've had an explosion in the large cruiser class that gets battleship burn time with the Conqueror's HE. That's just free damage for you. And then they also have good armor, but not like battleship levels armor. So with the Conqueror short fuse AP, that's all for you. And then, I mean, if you think about it too, like the Golden line, the Dutch cruiser line, the French battle cruiser line, those are two lines that just the Conqueror loves to see because their armor is just so well suited to eating Conqueror's HE or her AP, and you can burn them down from there. And also with, of course, submarines being a thing in the game too, having a ship that can reprint 2/3 of its HP after getting torpedoed by subs is very nice. You can get the legendary mod for Conqueror too and get a 10-second rudder shift time on her rudder as well. So that's also quite good for dealing with submarines. You know, the ability to turn on a dime like that is very much a pleasant thing when trying to deal with subs. So yeah, overall Conqueror, it's a line that I would say is worth grinding. I know many consider the Monarch to be a rough spot in the line. Monarch didn't really give me any trouble when I was going through it. Lion's also considered to be quite terrible, but again, I didn't have any problems going through Lion. And granted, this was 6 years ago, right? So might be a little bit different in today's World of Warships. But as far as I know, those are the only two low spots in the line. From Tier 3 to Tier 7, it's pretty solid. King George V, probably one of my favorite Tier 7 battleships. Again, Monarch and Lion did give me any problems, but your mileage might vary given today's World of Warships. So guys, my 2 cents on the Conqueror, and I look back at her in today's World of Warships. Let me know what you guys think about the Conqueror in the comments down below. Hope you guys have a wonderful Tuesday, wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.